Begin the current Daf Mesechtes Kidushin Daf Mem Test. We begin at the bottom of Mem Ches Mem Beis, 2 lines up in the bottom of the Amud. The Gemara continues on this theme that we just left off with in the previous Daf of this Mara Makom Hulai. Regarding when you tell something to someone, are you telling him Bedafka, you're makbid? Didn't you listen to the words I said? Or you saying no? It's just I'm telling you. Adim the Inya. I'm just telling you like a coordinate, but wasn't telling you specifically that the Gemara is going to elaborate on that concept. Which is goes by the Kazakh and Chesed, turn to Daf Chaim. So the Gemara, some of the important terms of concept is Mar Malkam Ulai, regarding telling someone just a good resource where to check, but I'm not particular about that. Get makusher is the concept of a tied get which Kahanim used to make so that they would not get divorced so easily, because if they do, it's too late already, and they get angry and they can't remarry because they can't marry a woman that was divorced. Hittel l'shvach, this concept of Rabbi Shimon, that if you get misled for the better regarding, would that be considered as valid? The Tanoim regarding different conditions. Tisha Kavim regarding, the Gemara has a bunch of Agadic teachings regarding 9 portions for the world was given to this, and then 1 for the rest of the world. So begin the current Daf Mem Ches Mem Beis, 2 lines up at the bottom of the Yamid. Amar Abai says, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Elazar, these 3 Tanoim, Kulas Rilu, they all hold this concept of Mar Makom Ulai, that when you tell your shliach to do something that's easy, and he does it in a harder way, that's not considered as he deviated from your instructions. The only reason why you told him the easy way was just to show him that it's okay, you could do it in an easy way. If there's a harder way to do it another way, but if you do it, that's okay too. It's just I'm not being so hard on you. Where do we find these 3 Tanaim? So Rav Shimon Hodamar, like we said this on the previous Daf from our Mishnah, that if he misled her for her benefit, where he says, and he gives her gold, Shimon holds, she's merely saying that she's accepting a silver coin would be acceptable, but of course gold would be okay too. So therefore Shimon holds that you can be engaged. That's the concept of Mar Makom. Shimon Leal is the Mishnah Baba Basra. As you can see on top of Memtes Amid Aleph, the Mishnah says over there, get pashut. Now, a get pashut means a simple get, which is made like the way ours are made, just 1 piece of paper. Eidav mitoichai. The witnesses are from inside, meaning beneath all the writing is where they sign their names. But makusher, which the Gemara in Baba Basra over there explains, which it was masakin for Kahanim, that they cannot go back and remarry the woman that they divorced, unlike a regular Yisrael. And when they would get angry, they would go to the sefer and they would say, quickly write me a get. I'm done with this woman. And give it to her. And then later on, the ascharata, suddenly there's no supper, suddenly the house is not clean, suddenly there's no one there to give him any love. So they instituted this get makusha. It's a great tircha. It's a whole effort to make it. And then he's like, do me a favor. You know what? He calms down already. He's like, you know what? I don't need this get. So the way you do it is that you leave on the top a blank line, then you write a line, and then again a blank line, and then you write a line, and you do this up until 3 or 4 or more lines. You have empty, and then you fold over that first part on the writing, and you stitch it. And then you go ahead and you fold the second empty space onto the line of writing beneath it, and you stitch it. And so to the third. So there, the halacha is idav me'achayrav. The witnesses are signed on the outside between each knot, between each stitching, which the Gemara over there learns out that by a get pashut, there's 2 witnesses. By a get makusher, you need 3 witnesses, and every single fold is called a kesher, it's called a knot. And there's 3 knots that you have on this get makusher. Now, if you come to increase the folds, then you have to increase the witnesses. But the rest of the text, of the generic text of the Taifas of the Shtar, is written in the normal way. Now, what happens if, like this says the Mishnah? What happens if you have a regular get that the witnesses sign not on the bottom as they're supposed to, but they actually sign on the outside, on the back, or the other way around? The get makusher sheksava edam mitaycha, that the witnesses sign from the inside. Says the Tana, kamash name b'shul, that both can be possible because you didn't do the way the chamor mesakin. One has to be on the outside, one has to be on the inside. Chanina ben Gamliel, he says, no, To get makusher, you have the witnesses signed on the inside. Kosher, that will be valid. Why? You didn't do it the way get makusher was instituted. No, you can make the get makusher into a get pashut. How so? Don't stitch the knots. Now, there's gaps of airspace between the upper lines because you left line. Who cares? Now, the reason that the Tanakama, who holds it would be possible, like Daf Yomi explains that he holds that you cannot make it into a pashut. Why? Because get makusher and get pashut have different ways of dating, of writing the date. Because you don't write a zman from makusher from that year, you actually write it from the year after that, which the Gemara there explains why. But al kapanim, you cannot make a get makusher which has the year after that into get pashut. So that's the machlekes of these first two Tanam. But our main thing is actually for the next Tana. He says, Hakol keminig Medina. Says everything is like the minig, the custom of that state of that country. A place where the minig is get pasha and you make it a makusher, or if it's the custom is to make a makusher makes a pasha, it's going to be possible. Because when the husband made a shliach to write the get was based on the minig of Medina. Now, that was not discussed by the first Tanoim. It's only that when you change the place of the witnesses. So that's what the Gemara asks and says, wait a second. But we asked on that Mishnah, what Tanakama does not hold of that we go based on the meaning of the Medina? Who disagrees with him that we have to say he says this? So Rav Ashi says, yeah, I'll explain to you. But Aser, it's a place, in the Higi Bepashit. The custom is really to write a regular get. But Va'avidlei, Makusher, and he made it into Makusher. Or Inami Ba'asad in the Higi Makusher. No, sorry, meaning if it's such a place that they usually do Pasha and he made a Makusher, or Inami. Ba'asad in the Higi Makusher, the place is always to do Makusher, Ba'avidlei Pasha. You're right, Kulam Pligi, no one's going to disagree. The Vati Kapeda, of course, he's particular, and everyone would agree to this halacha. He Pligi, the Machlekes, however, is Ba'asad in the Higi, it's a place that the custom is Bein B'Pasha, Bein Makusher. Some people do regular way. Some people do it with this complex way of makusher. He said to me, "Avadli pashid, make for me a get pashid, which was an easier shlichus." But also, Avadli makusher goes, doesn't this complex get makusher, which is a more difficult shlichus? That's the machlekes in that Mishnah. Marasav Tanakama, the first time I'm held Kepeda. No, he's particularly says, "I want a regular get," and you made makusher. That's it. It's gonna be possible. Marasav Hashem, we'll have no mar makmolai. He's just telling him, look, for me it's enough if you do it the regular generic way. You're dropping off my Esther. You're going to go bring me this whole ganze Megillah. When he does a makusher, since the minig Medina is also been makusher, it's going to be kosher. Now, the first time they disagree and they say, no, he's makbid. And he says, no, I only wanted a pasha. You made makusher. This is not what I ordered. So therefore you see a second Tana, that of Rabbi Shloimy ben Gamliel, who holds that Mara Makamulai and the Tanakama disagrees, holds no, there's Hakpada, just like we had from Rabbi Shimon in our Mishnah. The third Tana is Rebbe Lazar, which now we learn the Mishnah Masechet is Gittin. Aisha Sha'amra, if a woman says, "Iskabali giti b'makom plaining," she says to someone, "Go receive my get from me. I can't look at my soon-to-be ex. Go receive my get from me in that place." And she, however, got it for her from somewhere else. Tanakama says, "Puzzle. That's not. I didn't send you a shliach to go get it from Bayonne. I asked you to get it in Elizabeth, so it's gonna be possible." But Elizabeth says, "No, it's gonna be kosher." Obviously he holds mar mokim hilai. She was just saying you'll find him where he works over there in that area. But I don't care. You get it from him in Muncie. I don't care where you get it from him. On Tantikama, it was a kapeda. No, she was saying I don't want you to get it, but from there, and you're not my shlich anywhere else. So we see a third Tana, Rabbi Lazar, who says, no, it was just a maramakim. I don't care where you get it. I just wanted you to know where you could probably find them. Now, the Gemara continues to explain the machlekes we had in the Mishnah. Amar Ula says, machlekes, the whole machlekes in our Mishnah, which we said, if let's say she was misled with this Kidushin, where he said this cup and turns out a cup of something else, it was only b'shvach mammon. When it was a benefit monetarily, that's what Reb Shimon says, that look, although she was misled, she's going to be engaged because we're presuming that she's okay with that because it's better than what was even asked. But the Tanakh holds no is makbid. But if let's say it's something that's he's misrepresented his lineage. Where let's say he says on the condition that I'm a mamzer. Turns out he's not a mamzer, he's actually a nosen, which is from the Nesinim, from the Gevinim that converted to the Jewish people. The Ve'akol in the Mukadesh, according to everyone, she would not be engaged, because even Reb Shimon, who says when you mislead her for the better, she doesn't want that shvach, because now he lords himself over her, and he's more arrogant that he's not, that he's more meyuchas. So don't tell me that it's a shvach. Say, that she didn't know this. And says, yeah, don't worry. The fact that you didn't know Rebbe Shainikal is a tuus l'shvach. No. That even Reb Shimon would agree. That mistake would not say it's a megudeshes. Why? My timer. Misana derab mecharoi. A shoe that's bigger than my foot. Loibina, I don't want. I can't walk with such a big shoe. Which is a mashal saying, this is. I'm not going to have this by my chasna, all the Rosh Hashivas and all this thing. This is too big for me, and don't say that that's considered as a shvach. Similar in the Braisa, the Moed Shimon agrees if the misrepresentation was regarding his lineage, even though it's a shvach, she's not going to be engaged. Actually, precise reading of our Mishnah seems to indicate this too, because we learned in the second half of our Mishnah, which is on Amud Beis. Let's say he tells her, I'm Asha on the coin. Says, look, let's be engaged on the condition that I'm a coin. Then to Levi, turns out he's only a Levi. Let's say it's Levi, even if it's a coin, turns out it's a coin. Or let's say Nasan, he says that I'm a Nasan, which is from the Gevinim, because it says Vayitnim Yeshua. Yeshua placed them to be wood choppers and water carriers, which the Gemara in Yevamah says, and Daf Chesam Beis David was geyser on them that they don't have the same status as regular Yidden. But B'nimtza Mamza, it turns out he's a illegitimate child, or Mamza B'nimtza Nasan, whichever one. She's not going to be engaged. Shimon in the Seif of Mishnah doesn't disagree. So you see that there he agrees, because the Shmach Liyuchsim we don't say. So that says the Gemara, Rabashi asks, he says, wait a second. This is what we learned in the Sefer of our Mishnah, on Amud Beis. That let's say he tells her, Amanas Sheyeshli Bas, on the condition that I have a daughter, or Shivcha, or a maidservant that's Migudelis, which is an adult, and she's fit to serve me. But it turns out he doesn't really have a daughter or a maidservant that can serve him. She's like, I thought we were going to have cleaning help. I thought we were going to have a living. No. Or let's say it says, let's say it says, on the condition that I don't have. No, I don't have anyone. Don't worry, it's just me and you. I don't have any adult daughter or adult maidservant. But yes, it turns out that he does have either one of these. It's not going to be Kidushin. Wait a second. The Shevach Mamanhu. Wait a second. That's a case of where she's misled for something that's better for her. She has a living. And Rabbi Shimon doesn't say either that he disagrees over there. So you can tell me he doesn't disagree. How could that be? He said already in our Mishnah, Hittil Shvach of Mammon does work. So rather obviously, no, Polig Bernesha. He already disagreed in the first part of our Mishnah on Daf Mem Chesma Beis regarding when he says I'm poor and turns out that I'm wealthy. So the same thing that he's going to disagree L'Seifa in the last part regarding the Shivcha. It's just that once he disagreed in the Reisha, in Hittil Shvach, it's not a toys. He didn't have to go ahead and say it again in the Seifa. So you remember Raya. You could say by Shvach Yuchsin, he didn't have to disagree because Polik Bereisha already disagreed by the Shvach Mammon. So Bahuad L'Seifa, something regarding the Seifa that he disagrees regarding Shvach Yuchsin. So you don't have the Raya to tell me that Hashem would agree. The Gemara rejects the question. It's not true. Can you compare the two cases? It's not true. Hasam over there by the case of the daughter or the adult maidservant. Ed, both of them, meaning the ratio of our Mishnah when he says I'm poor, turns out I'm wealthy. And the Seifa when he says I don't have a maidservant, turns out he really does have a live and help. Both of them are the Shevach Mammon, are a benefit of monetary purposes. So Poli B'Reisha, so of course, once you already told me Rabbi Shimon in our Mishnah that he disagrees, so then the Seifa, of course I know that he doesn't have to go ahead and mention again the Seifa that he disagrees. It's the same concept. But you can't bring me Raya Hachal here by when he says he's a Levi, turns out he's a Kohen, the Shvach Yuchsenhu, which that's an increase of lineage, where you could maybe say that Rabbi Shimon agrees in this halacha, because like we said before, that he would agree it's not a Shvach because these shoes are too big to walk in. Imi, said the Polig, it would be true that Rabbi Shimon would disagree on that halacha. Nisni, he should have said it. So the fact that he doesn't say it, it is a Raya that he would agree that this halacha of Hittel Shvach Vayuchsen is not considered a valid Kedushin. Or Ibesim, if you want, you could say another approach. It's not true because Hachanami, the question that you're asking is not valid for a second reason. because when we said bas mugadelis, the reason why he didn't disagree with there, because it's not really a shvach mammon. The shvach yuchsim, that's actually a misrepresentation of lineage, and therefore Rabbi Shimon does agree that she's not going to be mugadeshes. Because misarvid my mugadelis, did you think the word mugadelis meant gedola mamash, meant literally an adult, and it's like a monetary benefit that I have a teenage girl that's going to help to drive and pick up groceries and this and that and clean around the house? No, my mugadelis means gadelis. It's a word of chashivas, of distinguished, of significance. The Amri, where she says, meaning the new wife that he's marrying, says, no, loy nicheli. I don't want to have a distinguished maidservant. Why? Because the shakli mili minoi, she's going to take whatever I say, and she's going to go and then pass it on to all my neighbors. Because since she's respected, so she's always talking with the neighbors, because she's like a personality. She has her own TikTok page with 50 million followers, and even though she's like a cleaning help, whatever, in my house, and she's going to hear words from me, and guess what? She's going to post it on in front of all my neighbors. Everyone's following her, and I'm going to be the joke of the laughing stock of the town. So therefore, it's a shvach yuchasin element, and therefore Shimon doesn't disagree. It's not really a shvach moment. Tosfos brings Rabbeinu Chanan that actually gadelis means migadelis sar, means the sheitlamacha, the hair cutting, and she goes from house to house, making everyone's hair and makeup, whatever, this and that. And she says, this is the part of the profession is to schmooze. That's how you get good business. And she's gonna say, oh, chatty. And I say, oh, you're in that household, right? Yeah. Oh my gosh, you can't believe what she said. Da 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 da. So that's a shvach yuchsin. It's not a moment thing, and therefore Shimon would agree in that case too. So therefore that rejects the Gemara's question, and therefore it could be that, like we said, that everyone agrees by shvach yuchsin that it's not going to be considered as a shvach. Now the Gemara continues in a related discussion regarding conditions of the Kidushin of Tanoim. Let's say he says, Amanasha ani karyana. Let's say he says, on the condition that I know how to read from the Torah. So Kivin Shakar Shleisha Psukim basic Nezah. Once he read 3 Psukim in Shul, Rez Mukadesh should be considered engaged because he's obviously he could read from the Torah. He says, no, actually you could read Targum until he reads and he says the translation. So the Gemara jumps in and says, what, you Targum Midaite? What, that he just gives his own translation, not like the Targum that we have? But Vatanya in the Brayso Bidami says in the Targum pasuk Kitzuchas, if someone translates a pasuk as its form, meaning that he does not diminish, meaning he wants to diminish the additions that our Targum has. If you read Targum, you'll see that many times Targum Onkelos has more words than the actual literal translation. And he says, no, I'm going to translate literally. Like, for example, when it says Leisana al Riv, which means don't respond to a dispute, the guy wants to translate Lo tasadin, you shouldn't testify regarding a court case, which is obviously, says the Gemara, Reza Badoy. So that's like a lie, because that's obviously not what the Torah is trying to say. And someone adds on, meaning he comes to say, look, since you see this permission to add on, I see Targum Onkelos adds on, I'm also going to add on wherever I want to. He's a blasphemer, and he's someone that disgraces HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he's changing his words. Because like Rashi says, when Onkelos adds on words, that wasn't on his own that he added on words. That was given to Har Sinai. It just was forgotten. And he reestablished, as the Gemara says in Megillah Daf Gimel. It says, B'Sam Seichel, that was given at Har Sinai, that's the Targum. So what does it mean that this guy translates? So the Gemara, no, my Targum, what does it mean that he could translate? It means Targum Nidan. It means our Targum of Targum Onkelos, that until he knows how to read and translate, only then will he be considered as a karyana, as a reader, that it'll be a Kidushin. The Amalei says to our karyana, where, so it says the Gemara, when we say this, that it's enough to read 3 psukim, it's Amalei karyana. If he said to her, I am a reader, but if he says, not just that I can read, but he says, I'm an expert reader, that's only if he could actually read precisely. He has to be proficient in all of Tanakh, Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim, then he's a Kara. Next case is, let's say he says, Amanasha ani shayna. Let's say he stipulates that he has learned. So what does it mean he's learned? So Chizkiyami says, halachis, he has to know halacha l'meishim mesinais. He says, Torah, which the Gemara assumes means Chumash, Torah Shabiksav. He says, really? Meis, the Gemara asks the following Brisa. Brisa says, Ezehi Mishnah. What's considered as Mishnah? What does it mean someone learned? Remeir says halachis. And B'Yudam says Medrash, not Chumash. That's the Sifra and the Sifri, which shows the halachas of Medrashim of the Psukim. So the Gemara says, you're right. The Gemara continues on Beis and explains my Torah. When that Tana said Torah, doesn't mean Chumash itself. It means Medrash Torah. It means the Medrashim, which is the Sifra and the Sifri. Then the guy is a learner. Now, so the Gemara, when we say this, the Amalot Tanina, it says that I've learned. Amalot Tanana. But let's say he says I'm knowledgeable. I'm a Tana. Then Adatani, then it's until he has learned Hilchasa, Sifra, Sifri, V'Tesefta. You have to know all the different Maimori Chazal on all of Chumash and the brises that are there. Only then are you a Tana. Let's say he says I'm an Ashani Talmud on the condition that I'm a Talmudic student. So we don't say that the guy has to be Kishimon ben Azar, Kishimon ben Zayma. These were Talmidim and they were Bachrim, and they never came to the age of Smicha. That's why they're called Ben. And we don't say their first name Shimon. And there was no one like them in the greatness and Torah in their times, as the Mishnah teaches in Seit of Testament Alpha, when Ben Azai passed away, Batla Shakdanim, the diligent ones had ceased to be. So you don't have to be such a Talmud. It's anyone that you ask him wherever, one of the places that he's learning. One thing from his learning, and he says it, which is not so deep, which is a brisa, and it says if a kala without a bracha, which they make the sheva brachas, is usher to husband like a nida. That's it. If he can answer one thing, let's say he says on the condition that I am a wise man. Don't say that he has to be like the sages of Yavna, like Rabbi Kiva and his colleagues. No, anyone that you ask him some wisdom, meaning something that depends on logic, regarding any area. I mean, he says it. He's already someone, and there it's going to be a Kidushin. Let's say he says, I want you to be engaged to me. I'm an Ashani Giber. The condition that I'm a strong man. Don't say Ka'avne Bener. And they meet this couple meets in the gym, and they're saying, "Yeah, here I'm going to give you this ball. This is a good workout ball, but on condition that I'm a strong person." So don't say it has to be like Avne Bener. That's the general of Shaul HaMelech, or Kuyev Ben Suru, who's the general of David, which were very mighty people. No. His friends are afraid of him. You don't want to give him a Shalom Aleichem. You give him a good Shabbos, he squishes, he crushes your bones of your fingers, he gives you that little pat on the back, and it goes flying. As long as his friends are afraid of him, Shoin bist a Giber, it's all subjective, for your Chevra. If his friends are afraid of him, then he's a Giber. Let's say he says, I'm an Ashani Asher. Claims to be rich. What does it mean, wealthy? So, we don't say Kidushin ben Charson, it has to be as wealthy as Rebbe Charson, which the Gemara in Yomei Daf Lamed base tells us that his father left him over 1,000 ships at sea, and he had correlating to that 1,000 cities on dry land. You don't have to be that wealthy. Or Kibbalazim and Nazariah, who he would give 12,000 calves of Meiser just from its flock every single year, says the Gemara Shabbos on the Dalma Beis. I don't be that wealthy. He comes into shul, they go, where's the Gvir? And they point to him. They honor him because of his wealth. That's a guy. If he said, I'm a Nash and the Usher, says, look, you want to get engaged to me? I'm a wealthy guy. On that condition, yeah? Fine. She comes, she finds out that they stand up for him, they give him something, a kuva, a shlishi, a chamishi. Okay, then they can be engaged. Let's say he says, I'm an Ashani Tzaddik, a well-known teaching, often quoted teaching. It's from this Gemara over here. It says, here, I want you to be engaged on the condition that I'm a Tzaddik. Says the Gemara, Rosh Gomer. Even if he's a totally wicked, this guy is such a schlechter mensch, Allah vaydes titte. But she's going to be engaged. Why? Shema hidden tshuva b'daita. Maybe a thought of repentance entered his consciousness. B'shanat tzaddik. It's a very appropriate this time of the year. Chivatin. Just that is you're going to be engaged. Amanasha ani tzaddik shoin bist a tzaddik bist the gres terusha. But by having this hiru tshuva, it's going to be a kedushin. Now, let's say it says Amanasha ani rusha. Let's say it says I'm going to engage you on the condition that I'm a wicked person. I feel it's tzaddik even the grosser Rebbe, grosser Rosh Hashiva, it's going to be engagement. How's that possible? Maybe he thought about idolatry in his thought process, and therefore he'd be a Rasha. So therefore, and it doesn't, because you could be a Rasha in that moment. As you do it from Tanya, the moment you're doing an Aveira, you're a Rasha in that moment. So although he talks about Rebbeini, this and that, the moment you're doing the Aveira, you're a Rasha in that moment. So even the grosser tzaddik, of course, it's tzaddik guma. But in that moment, he thought about some type of avodah, you'd be a Rasha, and therefore there would be engagement. Now, continue on this relative qualities that we spoke about. So the Gemara says an interesting discussion regarding some of these things like chachma that we spoke about. Asar kavim chachma, there was 10 portions of wisdom, which Rashi says refers to Torah and derech eretz, proper etiquette and Torah, that yardu la'olam came down to the world. Tisha not Eretz Yisrael, 9 kavim, 9 portions was 90% was taken by Eretz Yisrael, vechet kalam kulay, and the remaining 10% was taken by the rest of the world. Asar kavim yefi yardu la'olam, 10 portions of beauty was sent down to the world. Tisha not Yerushalayim, 9 of those was taken by Jerusalem, vechet kalam kulay, and the rest was taken for the rest of the world. The rest of the world has to share the remaining 10%. Asar kavim ashiris yardu la'olam. There's 10 portions of wealth that came down to the world. Tishanat l'Rami, Rome, which is a Western civilization, they're very into money. 90% was taken by Rome. And the rest of the world, look at Africa, look at India, look at all these different places. They took the remaining 10% of the wealth. Yud Kav Maniyas Yard L'Olam. There was 10 portions of poverty that was sent down to the world. Tishanat l'Bavel. Bavel took 90% of it. And the remaining 10% was taken by the rest of the world. Asar kavim gasus yard l'olam. There's 10 portions of arrogance that was sent down to the world. Tisha not le'elam, 90% was taken by elam. V'echad kalam kuloi, and the remaining 10% was taken by the rest of the world. The Gemara says, really? But gasus, arrogance, lebavel lo'inachis didn't go down to Bavel, went to elam? There's a pasuk in Zechariah that says, the esa einai ve'eda. I lift up my eyes and I see, v'hine shtayim nashim yotzis. Behold, there was 2 women going out. V'ruach bekanfeim, and there's the wind in their wings, and they had these wings, like the wings of the stork. And they lifted up the Eifa bein ha'aretz ubein hashemayim, between heaven and earth. Which Rashi says before that the pasuk said, Zois heresha, this is the wicked one. And he sent her within the Eifa, meaning the Yetzer Hara was given over in their hands, was sent inside of her, as the Gemara says on Daf Yomi Aleph, that they put the Yetzer Hara into this tube of lead. And they said to the angel that was speaking to me, where are they taking this Eifa, this measurement? Where are they taking this Yetzer Hara? And he said to me, they're going to build a house for it in the land of Shinar of Bavel. And he explains, because this refers to flattery, ruach, and arrogance, shiur Bavel, which went down to Bavel. Those are the 2 women. They were carrying the Yetzer Hara of flattery and gasas ruach of arrogance. Like it says, v'ruach bekamfeim. What's ruach? What was the wind in their wings? That's gasas ruach, which is the term of largesse, trying to be bluff, puffed up chest with all that wind in your chest. And Chanufa, says Rashi, it seems to him that was inferred from kamfe hachasida, the wings of the stork, because the stork does kindness only with her friends, as the Gemara says in Chulin Daf and Aleph. That's called the chasuda, which is flattery, which is not really a kind person. The kind person does for everyone, but like, oh yeah, they're just flattering people that you're passive, people pleaser, whatever you want to do. So, but one thing we see is that Gasa Ruach went down to Bavel, not to Elam. Says the Gemara, you're right. Lahacha nachas, it came down to Bavel, but v'shtavu v'hu dirishtavu v'lahasam. But then it evolved that it went over to Elam. And the precise reading indicates this, that when it says when they were going, these 2 women, it says when ultimately they were going to build a house for it in Bavel, the words actually said livnois la bayis, to build a house for it, which was only for flattery, because ultimately the other woman with arrogance actually went to Elam and not to Bavel. Or another interpretation, Rashi says, was live nice. They went to build, but it doesn't say they built. They didn't build it in Bavel. They actually built it in Elam. But either we infer that it wasn't in Bavel. The Gasa Ruach actually went to Elam. Says Ini, is that really so? But the master says similar. Gasas Ani is a sign for arrogance is a pauper. And who has to wear all those labels? The wealthy guy doesn't have to show off anything. He's not arrogant. If you see a guy is arrogant, know that he's a poor guy. But the poverty was in Bavel, not in Elam. So how could you say arrogance was in Elam? He says, no, my ani is, what do we mean that a sign for arrogance is poverty? It doesn't mean poverty of money. It means ani is the Torah. It means that a guy he's poor in his Torah learning, because Torah does not rest on someone who's arrogant, because since he's arrogant, he's not going to ask the appropriate questions. He's not going to review his learning because he's arrogant. And therefore, that would mean to say that you don't find Torah in the place of arrogance. Like somebody says a pasuk in Shirashim, Ochis lanu ketana. We have a sister that's a minor. B'shadayim elan, she doesn't have breasts. Remember Yechon, he says zu elam, that refers to elam. Shazach salim, where they merited to learn over there, but they did not merit to teach. Obviously, we see that the poverty in Elam, where there was arrogance, was a poverty of Torah learning, because Daniel lived in Elam, like it says in the Sefer Daniel, "Vani b'shushna bira shebe Elam haMedina," so to Mordechai, but their generation was not learning Torah. Only the Chacham learned. So it's as if they didn't have breasts to nurse the people. But in Bavel, they merited to teach Torah to the masses, like it says in Sefer Ezra, "Ki heichin lavavei lahavim b'toras Hashem v'lalamad liyisrael chal kamishpat." So therefore, we see that the poverty that was in Elam was the poverty of Torah learning, and therefore that's where the arrogance was, because arrogant people don't learn Torah. Now the Gemara continues, Asar Kabim Gevuri Yadol, there was 10 portions of might that went down to the world. Tisha Nutler Parsim, the Persians took 9 of them. Etc. Again, etc. is that the remaining 10% went to the rest of the world. Asar Kabim Kinim Yadol, 10 portions of lice went down to the world. Tisha Nutler Madai B'chulu, 90% went to Madai. And again, the remaining went to the rest of the world. There was 10 portions of sorcery. Witchcraft went down to the world. Tishanat Mitzrayim, B'chulu, Egypt took 90%, the rest went to the rest of the world. Sarkav Nagom Yardalaylam. 10 portions of Nagoyim, of Nega, of Tsaras went down to the world. Tes not Chazir B'chulu. Swine took 90% of this Nega, and the remaining went to the rest of the world. Yud comes Nus Yardalaylam. 10 portions of immorality went down to the world. Tishanat Arabia, as famous, Arabia, the Arabs, took 90% of licentiousness, and the remaining 10% went to the rest of the world. 10 portions of brazenness went down to the world, which really, Rashi says, means mamzerus, because mamzerim are brazen, where they don't have a normal upbringing. Tisha, not lamation, v'chulu, 90% went from Mation, like Rashi says, most of them were mamzerim, as the Gemara says later on the Ayin Alpha Mabeis. By Yuchasim, when it talks about the lineage, it says Mation Misa. The Gemara in Yivamis also says that the Psulim of Harpanya was because of the Psulim of Mation, as the Gemara says in the first paragraph within Daf Yud and Aleph. So again, because that's why they took all the brazenness, all the mamzerim over there. There's 10 portions of chatter, of conversation that went down to the world. 90% was taken by the women, and the men are just sitting there shaking their head, sitting silently. That was 10% was taken by the men. There was 10 portions of drunkenness that was sent down to the world. The Kushim, Ethiopia, took 90%, and the remaining 10% was in all the different bars all along the world. There was 10 portions of sleep that was sent down to the world. Slaves who are supposed to work, they took 90% of the sleep. They work 9 to 5, and then 6 they're sleeping till 9 o'clock in the morning. And the remaining 10% was sent for all the insomniacs who can't get any sleep. They're trying to get a portion of that pie of that 10%. Now, I'll look at the next Mishnah. We'll just start the Mishnah that talks about the halacha of tois, of mistakes. It says the Mishnah, let's say we already said this Mishnah, where let's say says, look, let's get engaged. Here's this ring. On the Kidushin Daf turns into a Levi. Let's say it's a Levi nimtza kohen turns into a kohen. Or let's say nasim nimtza mamzer, or mamzer nimtza nasim, or ben ir nimtza ben krach, where he says on the condition that I live out in the suburbs, and it turns out that he lives in the urban area. Now, living in a city is more difficult, where there's all the markets and all the superstores and all this, and prices are high, and people are pushing and shoving, and there's traffic congestion. Well, let's say ben krach v'nimtza ben ir. Let's say he says, actually, I live in the city, but it turns out he has a beautiful villa out in the suburbs. So even though he misled her for benefit, but it's still a toyis. Amanasha beisi karv lamerchetz. Let's say he says, yeah, on the condition that my house is close to the bathhouse, but it turns out it's very far from the bathhouse. Or rachik v'nimtza karv. Or let's say he says, yeah, our house is very far away from the pool. Turns out it's very close to the pool. He says, on the condition that I have an adult, or however we translated that, of a daughter or maidservant, he really doesn't have, or he says, I don't have, but Yeshli turns out he does have. Or he says, I don't have any kids. Turns out he has a whole family. He says, that I have a family. Turns out he doesn't have any family. So, regarding all of them, although she says that in my heart, I had in mind that even though that it's really how it is right now, that the Kidushin is not true, still I had in mind to be Kidushin. Says the Tanakama, says the Mishnah, in the Mekadesh she's not engaged. And B'chein Hisha to us, it goes the other way around. If she misleads him, she says, yeah, I have this family, I have this, blah, 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 blah. It's going to be a Kidushin b'toyis, and therefore it's not going to be a Kidushin. Thank you to any time.